Michael's in the pub.
Hello, my little Luxxes. This is another episode of Luxxy Charms, and I'm your host, Cosplayer Charsie Luxxx, and I am the afterlife of the party, and I am wishing for you to come join me in the afterlife of the party by joining me for another horror movie review. Hello, welcome back to another Luxxy Charms.
Hello!
And as stated before, and as always, all freaks, geeks, weirdos, those who are into the unusual and the strange, and especially into horror films and anything of that genre, you are welcome to come and join the Luxxy family. Please like, please subscribe, and as I've been kind of saying the last few episodes, that if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming and joining me here. And just to be on the safe side, please double check and make sure that you are still subscribed, due to the fact that YouTube likes doing this weird thing where they'll just randomly unsubscribe people from channels and whatnot. Who knows why anything does anything in this day and age. But thank you so much for joining me here, and I am super excited to talk about the month of July's theme, which is When Sharks Attack. And it's supposed to kind of go on brand with the fact that for the month of July we have Shark Week happen. Any one of you that knows me, I'm not going to be able to pronounce the term, but I have a deathly fear of the ocean. But I've been conquering my fears the last few times that I have been there and have seen it. In fact, this last October, me and my husband and a couple of our friends were down at Destin, Florida, and was able to be on the beach and even to step into the ocean, and I wasn't having panic attacks or anything like that. But those of you who know me and those who are brand new, welcome. And the fact that I really get into ocean-themed horror films because, obviously, having a fear of the ocean, it kind of brings up that anxiety. It brings up that level of actually having fear for something. But in honor of this theme for When Sharks Attack, we are going to open it up by giving my horror review of Jaws. Now, I technically should say that I am revisiting this film because back, gosh, has that been like 2 years ago now? That is wild to think about. But yeah, 2 years ago, when I was on a joint podcast with my friend DC, we actually covered and did a movie review on Jaws. So I am revisiting it and wanting to talk about my number one favorite shark film of all time, which is Jaws. And of course, we always gotta give a spoiler alert, and also viewer discretion advised. Those of you who are not into spoilers whatsoever, you definitely do not want to watch this. Granted, yes, Jaws is from 1975, so it was from quite a bit of time ago. Spoiler alert and viewer discretion advised. We will open up this movie review by talking about the cast and the crew of the film. You have Roy Scheider as Brody, Robert Shaw as Quint, Richard Dreyfuss as Hooper, Lorraine Gary as Ellen Brody, Murray Hamilton as Vaughn, Carl Gottlieb as Meadows, Jeffrey Kramer as Hendricks, Susan Backlini as Chrissy, Jonathan Villey as Cassidy, Chris Rebello as Michael Brody, Jay Mello as Sean Brody, Lee Ferrero as Mrs. Kittner, Jeffrey Voorhees as Alex Kittner, Craig Kingsbury as Ben Gardner, Robert Nevin as medical examiner, and Peter Benchley as interviewer. Director, Steven Spielberg, and writers are Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb. which you should recognize the names that I just said for Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb, because they both had parts in this film. And for a quick storyline plot synopsis, I'm going to read the one that is on IMDb. When a killer shark unleashes chaos on a beach community off Cape Cod, it's up to a local sheriff, a marine biologist, and an old seafarer to hunt the beast down.
He made me do it! He told me to do it!
Now, I could totally sit here and say that since I've already done a movie review on this with my buddy DC on the old YouTube channel, which was Little Channel of Horrors, that I wouldn't go so in depth with this one and everything, but I mean, who am I kidding? I'm probably gonna go off the rails talking about this one. But this film is fascinating in so many aspects, and the fact that this is like the cream of the crop when it comes to a monster film, a creature feature, a seafarer's nightmare, or an adventure thriller type of film, and just all the things and aspects that kind of happened in order for this film to for it to turn into what it became. And it's fascinating knowing the history about this film and that how things ended up happening, because there were a lot of negative things that happened while trying to film this. Like, there was a lot of bad luck. But because of that, it also made this film be something special, something unique, and things that had never been done before were done on this film. Granted, most people also learned from this film that they were never going to do that again, which one of the major things was the fact that this was filmed out on the Atlantic Ocean. Most of the time, people, when they would film, it would be out in like a pond, a very calm lake, or even in a gigantic water tank that's in a studio. And they learned so much from this one, and having to deal with the chaos of the ocean and why people don't film out there. But we'll get more into that when I get into the fascinating and fun and interesting facts about this film. But we will kind of do my little deep dive in talking about the film and the fact that this one is perfect to watch for the 4th of July, because it takes place on the 4th of July weekend. And it takes place in a small town called, not to be confused where I like to say Amityville, but it's Amity Island, which was actually Martha's Vineyard in real life. But it takes place on a small town island village that takes off and gets popular in the summertime because most people like to come and to spend the time on the beach, so it is their tourist season. Well, the movie opens up where you have Chrissy and another gentleman who meet up at a party and decide that while they are drinking and having a good time,
I can swim, just can't walk or dress myself.
and to run out and go skinny dipping in the water. Well, of course, the young gentleman passes out on the beach, and you have poor Chrissy who's out in the water by herself. She is attacked by a mysterious creature that comes from below and drags her down to the depths. Well, in this happening, obviously we have Chief Brody, who is the main sheriff on the town, and it cues into his story, where obviously it's just supposed to be a normal day in the summertime where him and his family have just recently moved here and he's just recently become the sheriff of this small town. Well, all this chaos starts happening. So first he gets a call that there's a missing girl. Well, they end up finding this missing girl and finding out that she was attacked and killed by a shark. Well, obviously you have the mayor of the town that he finds out that Chief Brody wants to close down this town, well, I shouldn't say close down the town. He wants to close down the beaches. For good reasons. He doesn't want people out swimming in case there is a shark that is indeed a man-eater and is attacking people. Well, the mayor, technically he's the main villain of this film. It's technically not really the shark because he's just an animal, or a fish in this one's case. But the mayor wants to push Brody and tells him that this is just a freak thing. We can't close the beaches. We can't afford to do that because it is tourist season. So against Brody's wishes, the mayor decides that for the 4th of July weekend, they were going to carry on as normal, and he had the beaches open. Well, in doing so, a little boy ends up getting attacked and killed by this shark. Well, because of this little boy dying, the mother decides to put forth a reward to kill this shark that killed her son, and chaos kind of ensues from that as well. And you get the typical thing where you kind of think in your head that, you know, people really can't be that dumb, especially over this amount of time and that. And I look back, and this film was made in 1975. But you're watching all these people that go nuts over trying to kill this fish, this shark. And they are being moronic, they are being stupid, they are all piling in their boats, they're on top of each other, some of them have dynamite.
They're chilling right now.
Summon, what the hell was that?
They're trucking the shark now.
$8,000 divided 4 ways is what? What you slamming?
And they're just being so stupid out on the water. And that's when we're introduced to Hooper's character for the first time, that he's the marine biologist that shows up to help Brody. And he's even mocking and making fun. Like, it's the perfect set of comedic relief when you have Hooper's character where he's like, yeah, you're all gonna die because you're stupid.
Well, then, can you tell me if there's a good restaurant or hotel on the island?
You walk straight ahead.
They're all gonna die.
All about him.
It's just one of those weird things where I think about it, and it's like, this film was made 50 plus years ago. And I think of how things happen in today's world where it's like, God, people can't be that dumb. And it keeps happening. History always repeats itself. And I'm watching this movie and it's like, people always do this. There's the follow mentality where everybody will just be crazy, just all over the place. So I find that scene so interesting and fascinating in itself. Well, obviously one of these crazy boats ends up catching a shark, but obviously it's not the right shark. But the mayor wants to say and claim that yes, this is indeed the right shark. So he wants to keep the beaches open. He wants tourist season to carry on. But Chief Brody and Hooper both are trying to say, hey, we should cut open this shark to find out if it is indeed the right shark. Well, they sneak in at night to open up the shark, and they realize that indeed this is not the right shark. But the mayor continues to ignore them, and he keeps the beaches open. Well, because of the beaches still being open and everything, once again, another person gets attacked by this shark. After all this prolonged instances of Brody trying to close the beaches and that, well, now it's finally official that the beaches are closed. Well, the mayor also puts forth, after Brody having to really push the mayor, although Brody's kind of at his wit's end due to the fact that his son, his eldest son, was almost a victim of this shark as well. So he's very pissed off at this mayor.
I was acting in the town's best interest.
That's right, you were acting in the town's best interest, and that's why you're going to do the right thing. That's why you're going to sign this, and we're going to pay that guy what he wants.
Tells the mayor and gets him to sign this paperwork that they are going to pay Quint, this man who can kill the shark, that he's got this vendetta against sharks. but he has a high price.
I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. And you gotta make up your minds. You wanna stay alive and ante up? You wanna play it cheap? Be on welfare the whole winter.
But because of this situation happening, Brody is finally able to get the permission to get Quint hired in order to kill the shark. So we move to kind of like a different section that it feels like this movie develops into something different. And now you are on the boat with Quint, Brody, and Hooper, and they're all on the hunt for this shark. Well, as it continues, we get that famous line where Chief Brody is out chumming the waters trying to attract the shark, and when the shark finally pops up its gigantic head for the first time, and we get the famous scene of where Brody goes and looks at Quint and tells him, "You're gonna need a bigger boat."
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
But of course, the hunt for this gigantic shark just continues on. It's supposed to be a 25-foot shark, great white shark, and that Quint, you find out why he's got this big vendetta against sharks and everything. You find out that he was on the USS Indianapolis, and that this is why he's got this vendetta against sharks and that he wants to kill them.
So 1,100 men went in the war. 316 men come out. The Sharks took the rest June the 29th, 1945. Anyway, we delivered the bomb.
But unfortunately, as the story continues and as these gentlemen keep trying to kill this shark, that unfortunately they do end up losing Quint. But in the very climatic ending, you finally have where Chief Brody, as the Orca, the ship that was Quint's, is slowly sinking down into the depths because the shark has been destroying it board by board. But as Chief Brody, just in that final moments, is finally able to blow a tank that is in the shark's mouth, we get that second famous line by Chief Brody. "Smile, you son of a bitch," as the shark blows up into hundreds of little chunks and pieces.
Smile, you son of a...
Now, we can talk a lot of facts about Jaws, and there is a lot of documentaries out there, and the fact that everyone that was the cast and the crew of this film, they remember it. And it's weird because they remember it in an angry, hateful way, and they also remember it in a loving way as well. And the reasoning why that they had a lot of negative feelings towards this film is because a lot of bad luck happened while they were filming it when they were out in the ocean. No, they had originally a certain budget and a certain amount of days that they were supposed to follow. I believe that it was like a time period of like 3 months that they had to film this, and it started in about May. Well, they had certain days set aside for like rainy days or anything that could have gone bad, that they had some certain extra days set aside. But when you're filming on the ocean, it is chaotic. It is not predictable. So having the fact where all of a sudden they got down to the money to where they didn't have any extra days anymore, and all they had left to film was the offshore in the ocean, anything that had to be a shark scene, that was all that was left. And they went over budget by quite a bit, and they went over their days by quite a bit, where it was originally around 90 days was their set schedule, and they went about 152 days. In fact, it might have even been less time period for them. They might have even only had like 2 months worth, so maybe only 60 days. So I could be wrong about the 90 days. It might have only been 60 days that they were allowed. And they went 152 days, so they were over budget, they were over their time schedule, and they were always being rushed by the studios. And the fact that how everything played out for this one, but it also made this film so unique, so different at the same time. And as much as a pain in the ass as this was for Spielberg and the cast and the crew, and for filming it out on the ocean, which also proves why you don't film out on the ocean. But it's like what Spielberg said himself. There's a different texture to the ocean. There's an atmosphere to it that you just can't capture inside a studio tank or from a calm lake or anything like that. That this was done on the ocean for the first time ever. But they had made this mechanical shark, because obviously you can't just wrangle and train a great white shark to work with you. So they had made this mechanical shark, and this mechanical shark worked beautifully in fresh water where it was made, and that the mechanics of it would work perfectly. But as soon as the shark, Bruce, the mechanical shark has his own special name, but when Bruce was introduced to salt water, the salt just deteriorated, and obviously this poor electronic shark stopped working. So a lot of the cast and the crew, including Richard Dreyfuss, would even tell the stories that you could hear them talking over walkie-talkies and basically stating that, we repeat, the shark is not working, the shark is not working. So they had to come up with new ideas on how to get this shark to finally work. So instead of having this mechanicals, it would be through air compressors, and that they had created this offshore island, or a man-made island, that they called the garage sale.
In the middle of this armada was the centerpiece, a barge used to run the shark. There was so much paraphernalia on it, they gave it a name.
The SS Garage Sale.
That was the call sign. Garage sale, Shark City, over.
The crew would be working this mechanical shark from this man-made island that they had. But the problem was that poor Bruce, 9 times out of 10, would not work. So they had to deal with so many problems for the final shots that they had. Because, I mean, obviously, the first parts of it, it worked perfectly while they could film on land and that. But any time that they had to film anything with the shark, he wouldn't work. So because of this, Steven Spielberg had to start changing his idea of how the story was going to work for the shark. Because originally, the shark was going to be shown a lot. And, like, right away, too. Even with Chrissy's death, that right at the beginning, you would see the shark. Well, because of that aspect, Spielberg had to start thinking differently. So it turned into, instead of this being a monster film, this turned more into an in-depth horror kind of ghost story at the same time, because then it became the perspective of the camera. Which, for the camera idea, they created this box that was a glass and wood box that they could put the camera safely in, and that it created that beautiful horizon line that we see a lot in the film Jaws. And it's the idea that it's the interpretation of you're seeing through the shark's eyes, and that you're seeing below the people. You don't actually see the shark, but it's implied that he's there. And because of this weird happy accident, it actually makes this film so much more spooky and gritty, and instead of you seeing the monster, it's implied, so it's even more scary than what would have initially been the original idea for this. In a weird way, years later, we're looking back on it and thinking, hey, maybe it's a good thing Bruce didn't work, because the film that we got was just so amazing and beautiful, and the artistic ideas that they had to come up with in order to work through the fact that this mechanical shark didn't work. But at the time, obviously, it was devastating for them, and that Spielberg had a lot of restless nights, and that, you know, he sweated out basically in the privacy of his own little cabin. And he worked with Gottlieb literally nightly they would create the script, that because it was forever changing and everything, and that they couldn't necessarily go by the book that Peter Benchley had originally written, which was very popular in 1974. It even became one of the #1 selling books of the time, which obviously that's why the rush for the film was because they were trying to get this film done while this book was still super popular, so they were hoping to be able to have this film at the same time. But from the book to the screenplay, and even from the screenplay to it becoming film, it changed several different ways due to the fact that obviously they had to change the script as it went along. And even Richard Dreyfuss's character Hooper, in the book and in the original screenplay, his character was supposed to pass away. He was supposed to be a victim of the shark. Well, things ended up changing due to the fact that they did have real footage of sharks off the shoreline of Australia. And what was interesting for how they created the looks for Hooper being underwater with a real shark, the great whites that they had, the largest they had were about 15 footers, 16 footers. So they weren't as extreme or as large as what Spielberg was looking for. So they came up with the idea that they were going to take a smaller gentleman and stick him in the cage, and that from the perspective of being a very short, tiny man compared to a 15-footer for a great white, that it would have the perspective and look like it was a 25, 30-foot shark. And they got this scene, this beautiful footage of this shark where it leaps up and it gets caught on this cage, and they're filming it, and it's just it's beautiful footage. Well, it was a tester shot, and while they were doing the tester shot, the guy wasn't in the cage. So they had this beautiful, wonderful footage, and all of a sudden the cast and the crew and Spielberg and all of them realized, they're like, well, we can't use this. So that's when Spielberg decided, well, what if Hooper lives? What if Hooper escapes the cage, and that's why he wasn't in the cage while this scene is happening? And that's why Hooper's character gets to live, is by some freak chance of this footage that ends up happening. And it's just beautiful footage, which you can see in the film. It's the scene where the shark is on top of the cage and is rolling on it, and it's the camera underneath it and everything. And that's the scene where you see that Hooper's swimming down to the bottom of the ocean. So because of that, my favorite character, Hooper, gets to live. And I love and adore Richard Dreyfuss's character, and I've loved him from American Graffiti and just his little cameos where he pops up here and there. But Hooper is just one of those characters that I absolutely love. So obviously I'm rooting for when Hooper's character survives and lives. But yeah, there's like I said, you can go so into depth about this film, and just knowing so much about it and just the little details. And I can even share in my description below a couple of different documentaries that I had watched, and just the little details that are part of it, and just how everybody talked about this film and just what it became. And it's one of the very first blockbuster hits. And you gotta think of a time and a period for 1975. This is how you saw movies. It didn't just come out on VHS and you just had it readily available to you to be able to watch movies whenever you wanted. You had to go to the movie theaters. So this actually was in theaters for an entire year straight. And they said that for the opening weeks of this film, that people just wrapped around the blocks in a line just to be able to watch and see this film. And when you think about it, and the fact of how everything happened back then, that I think of how desensitized we are nowadays, and thinking about when people first would talk about seeing this film, and that people were screaming, they were jumping out of their seats. The scene where the little boy, the little Kittner boy, when he dies, that Spielberg even talks about seeing a guy get up and start running out of the theaters and throwing up in the lobby. He was trying to make it to the bathroom so that he could get sick there, but he didn't make it in time. And it's just the fact of thinking that a certain scene, to get that kind of a gut reaction from it. I admire how cinema has just grown and changed. And I mean, obviously nowadays we're so desensitized to gore and that it is thrown in our face or shoved down our throats, I guess. To just think of this film, and I think of it in such a fond way, and it's an adventure, it's an experience. And me watching this as a kid, I was just so petrified and scared of it. And even nowadays watching it, like, a lot of people try to argue and say that this isn't a horror film, and it's like, it is definitely a horror film. It's a creature feature, it's a type of thriller, just gets under your skin if you think about it, because it's like, how many people, especially to this day, don't want to get in the water because of Jaws? And it's a beautiful experience. And to think of how old this film is and just how many people still love and appreciate it. And this is the film that made Spielberg's career, and it launched a whole bunch of other actors and actresses and brought their careers as well. Now, obviously, I can ramble on and on and on about this film, because this is the cream of the crop. This is the chef's kiss of all shark films. And even when I put out my post asking people, what is your favorite shark film? A huge majority said Jaws. And Jaws is also my favorite shark movie. But I love shark films. And I love the amazing, the good ones, the creepy ones. I also love the cheesy, the bad ones. There's something about shark films that I can digest them for hours on end. And in fact, if you want to watch a lot of really good, bad shark films, Tubi has actually put out a lot of shark films on theirs. So we can move into my thoughts of the film and recommendations, but I mean, obviously I was saying from the very get-go that this is my #1 favorite shark film, so obviously I recommend it. And I can't see anyone disliking this film. There's just so much about it, and it's the beginning of the shark films. It is the beginning of horror films and how a different kind of subgenre kind of develops and stems from it. And and the fact that you get Quint's speech for the USS Indianapolis, and the fact that he's able to tell a story of the men that had survived that terrible crisis, and that's the part of the script, that is the storyline of when you realize that Jaws is this film, this epic film. And the fact that it's like this man who's got this vendetta against the sharks, and that in the end, it's kind of like the tale of Moby Dick, that he's got this vendetta against it, and in the end, he meets his demise due to the fact that instead of this man going back home and just living his life, he decides that he's out to seek revenge on these creatures, on these sharks out in the deep. So it's very similar to the idea of being the great white shark, or like Moby Dick, that he goes down with his ship, he goes down with this shark. The story then turns to Brody, who is your average man, that he's kind, he's gentle, he's wonderful, he is the audience. And he becomes the epic hero of the story. Brody, the whole entire time, he's just your average, really good guy, and that he has got this fear of the water, and that he just wants nothing to do with the ocean. And you get to the ending to where he is the one that ultimately kills the shark, and he ends up being the main hero of the film. So it's just this beautiful story from point A to point B, even though that most of the majority of the time Spielberg and Gottlieb were creating the story daily. But because of that experience at the same time, they got to work with the actors and the actresses and get their perspectives and get even their points of view to be like, hey, you really are in depth with this character. How do you think that they would handle this? How would they go about this? And it's because of films like this that I love and appreciate horror films. And the fact that horror films are so much more in depth than what people give them credit for. And there's such a history to this, and that because of this film is what launched Spielberg's career, essentially. And because of the success of this film, he was able to create things like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And we all know exactly where his career is now and what he's been able to develop. But yes, I really, really, really hope that you enjoyed this horror movie review. Like I said, I could go way more into depth about this one, and the more I'm sitting here, the more stuff I keep thinking of. The fact that Spielberg himself almost didn't even do this film. His friend had even suggested to him that he needed to do Jaws because it was more commercial compared to the one that he was thinking about doing, which that film is not one that I think of or even know of, and right now I can't even remember the name of it, that it was The Luck of something. I'll put it in the description or something. But I mean, that tells you that he made the right decision in making Jaws, because everybody knows Jaws, everybody talks about Jaws, whereas that other film, I can't even remember the name of it. I'm sure it's a wonderful film, but it's not Jaws. And it's not the wonderful, fun memory that we all have, especially for our first watches. And even the other day, while I'm watching it, I'm still enthralled with it. And I still feel like I can see and hear different little details in it that I missed from all the hundreds of times I've watched it before then. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful film. So let me know in the comments down below what you think of Jaws, your fond memories of it. Let me know other shark films that you love and enjoy as well. Maybe even some of the bad ones, because I mean, we all know I love my cheesy, bad B-rated horror films. But thank you so much for joining me here on another Luxxy Charms. And if you would like to follow me on my other social medias, please follow me on my Twitter for Charsie Luxxx with 3 X's, or my Instagram for Charsie87, which I also have a Threads now, so that is also Charsie87. And as always, I want to thank you so much for joining me here, and also please come join me in the afterlife of the party, since I am the afterlife of the party here on YouTube. And as always, I really, really hope that you have a Luxxy Charms kind of day. Bye! So it was come, can't speak. And for a quick plot, which was actually Martha's Vineyard, to run out and to go skinny dipping in the water. That he's got this vendetta, because like I said, it was originally around, and so yeah. Hello, my little Luxxes.
Go to the end of the barrels! Further out!
What?
Further out!
Why?
Go further out!
What for?
Will you go to the end of the pulpit, please?
What?
Will you please go to the end of the pulpit?
What for?
I need to have something in the foreground to give it some scale.
Foreground my ass!